Hi, everybody. We're just going to give it a moment for people to join us, and then we'll get started. Just a heads up that this is being recorded, and thank you for joining us as we queue everybody up. Okay, so as people are rolling in, I just want to say a big welcome. I am Melissa Joy, and you are here attending a webinar or book discussion, How to Pay for College. And we are so excited to have the author of the book, How to Pay for College, Ann Garcia, joining us. Ann, welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
I'm so glad that you're here as well, and really excited for the discussion. I want to take just a minute for you to introduce yourself, and then we're going to dive right in. Tonight, we're going to be discussing the book. You'll notice it's just me and Ann on video, so we're saving you from worrying about, whatever's going on in the background, whether you're making dinner or you've got your kids around the computer to watch it too. I had somebody ask, hey, I've got a senior this year. Would this be appropriate for them to listen to as well? Thumbs up on that. And but we would welcome your questions. So you can both raise a hand or preferably just use the Q&A, and we'll make sure to get your questions going. So we'll be happy to stop all along the way. And our goal is to talk for 45 minutes to an hour. Throw us some curveballs. I'd love to discuss some tough questions. And Ann, so you are a financial planner like myself, and tell me a little bit about your background of why you got deep into this college financial planning area.
Yeah, so when I started out as an advisor years ago at the firm that I worked in, one day my boss came to me and said, such and such client has a bunch of questions about college and I don't know anything about this. Do you want to find something out about it? And I thought, that's actually something I want to know about for myself too. So happy to find it out. And I realized as I progressed through my career and met more clients that lots and lots of families had these same sets of questions about paying for college, and very few advisors were talking about it. And I was also talking with another group of people which were young adults who were struggling to save up to buy a home or contribute to retirement or anything like that because they'd taken out so much student loan debt to pay for their college education. And so I felt like like there was an opportunity to maybe get ahead of the next generation of that by really leaning into this topic and learning more and providing content about it as broadly as possible.
So you've been a content creator for a while, right? You had the College Financial Lady website, right?
Right. Yeah. So I started writing a blog one year as a New Year's resolution. And I just realized I'd been getting the same questions from people again and again and again. And I thought, okay, well, I could start, writing the answers in those blog posts. And then the next time the question comes up, I won't have to, retype the whole thing. And so I went about this for a couple of months, and then one day I saw a press request from the New York Times that was about a college planning related issue that I had just written a blog post about. And so I reached out to the reporter and said, here's what I think about this. And in fact, I just wrote this blog post about it. And he interviewed me for the article and included a link to my blog in the online version of the article. And so suddenly I had people from all over the country, following me and coming to me for guidance on this. And then when the pandemic hit a couple of years ago, I was like, well, maybe there's a productive way to use some of all this extra time that we have. And an opportunity came up to turn all that content into a book.
And here it is.
And here it is. I think 2 years later.
So many of our attendees have the book and are reading it. And I love that it is really matter of fact. It also tells a little bit about your story, but there's so many effective resources in the book and answers to questions. And even as a financial planner who advises people, including in their financial plans, is, paying for kids' education, paying off their student loans. There's a ton that I learned by talking to you over the years. We met at early pandemic times, I feel like, and then also reading the book. So I'm excited to dive into the discussion.
Excellent. Me too.
Well, one of the first things, the first chapter, you talk about why college. And gosh, I think that is such an important conversation because not every kid um, needs the same, education for school. And there's certainly different outcomes depending on, what you go to school for or how much debt you come out with. But how did you start talking to your kids about, college is important? Of course, you and your husband, he's a Michigan alum, so go blue. And you're a graduate of the California system at Berkeley. But how did you have those real world discussions with your kids? And then how did that influence how you talk to people in the book?
Yeah. In some ways it was a little bit accidental how we got started on this. My husband and I are both, diehard fans of our alma maters, and we would always, and, being here in Oregon, there's not a lot of Michigan fans, not a lot of Cal fans. And so we were always kind of like the outlier family, and our kids thought it was kind of special that they were Cal fans and Michigan fans and not Ducks fans or Beavers fans. And, somewhere along the line, we both looked at what it would cost to send our kids to one of our two colleges, and we're like, oh, that's not going to happen.
No.
And so my husband jokingly, so we have Adidas and Nike headquarters here, and he was at the Adidas employee store, and they had a t-shirt that just said college.
Yeah.
And he's like, this is what I'm getting them from now on. No more Michigan gear, no more Cal gear. Don't want them, focused on, on either of those schools. And we really realized that that we needed to think long and hard about what our actual priorities were as far as getting them through college, not just being able to say, oh, my kids followed my footsteps and went to Berkeley, or followed my husband's and went to Michigan, but what were the people that we were trying to create, and what did that look like, and what resources did we have available to get them from where they were at that point in life to graduating from college, while at the same time, making sure that we found good fits for them academically, socially, and of course, financially. And that was really, I feel like one of the gifts of being a twin mom is you really get to observe that children are different and your own kids are different. And despite having all the same influences and all the same experiences virtually, that my kids are two really, really different people. And we went through two really, really different college search processes and selection processes. And the good news is they're both blissfully happy where they are. They found places that are really great for them, that are, also great fits for us as a family. They'll both graduate debt-free from their top choice college this coming year. At least one of them has a job too.
Where do they go to school?
So my daughter's at the University of Chicago and my son is at the University of Arizona. And so, for him, his whole vision of college was like football Saturdays and, being in a big school and whatnot. And her whole vision of college was, Ivy covered buildings and small and intense discussions and so, so really, really different things that they were looking for, really different career and interests and whatnot. And, and they've gone to very, very different paths. The thing that I find really fascinating, having, gone through this process of writing this book and researching this topic and whatnot, they both, despite having, being at very, very different colleges with very, very different profiles, both of them were interning for Fortune 500 companies over the summer, in similar types of roles, and we're hoping that they'll both end up with job offers from those companies. And so, many paths can lead to similar outcomes. I mean, we see that among our friend groups. We know plenty of people who went to community college or went to private college or went to public college or went to a not very selective college, or, we as adults, we know intuitively that there are lots and lots of paths, but when we look at our own kids, it's hard to remember there are lots and lots of good paths, not just this one that I'm the most excited about as a parent.
Sometimes the college decision seems like the finish line, and really it's a starting line, although there's a handoff hopefully a handoff of kind of who's in charge and some transition time, right? So,
Yeah.
and along the way, money plays a lot into it. So you said you quit buying the out of state, high your alum schools, and then things turned around though, and that both your kids went out of state. One to isn't Chicago a private institution?
It is. And, ironically, and people always ask me, like, how could I, as the college financial lady, send one of my kids to the world's most expensive university? And, the answer is they're also one of the world's most generous universities. And it was her second cheapest choice of
Which
all
is
the colleges that
fascinating.
she applied to. And, and likewise for our son, he was really committed to not staying in state. He's always been the person who pursued his own path. He played club soccer on a team that no one from his high school played for. His girlfriend went to a different high school. He always kind of did his own thing. And he really was not excited about going to the University of Oregon. He was also not excited about a lot of the academic aspects of high school. So we were not excited about investing in an expensive college for a kid who hadn't done much in high school. And we kind of said, here's what your budget is. We think, that'll get you through U of O or Oregon State. And you're welcome to see if you can find something else that works for those dollars. And he did. And so yeah, it was a great lesson for us that we found we really had a lot more choices than we thought we had for both of our kids. I knew that my daughter would have a lot of choices because she was an excellent student. We jokingly call her a D1 mathlete. My son was a very normal kid and, didn't have a terrific GPA. Participated in a lot of stuff. He was your well-rounded, almost like a 1980s kid. We joke. Had a job, played sports, hung out with friends, did that kind of stuff. And he was able to find a great scholarship offer to do what he wanted to do. And the funny thing is, we liked the version of Alex that was interested in University of Arizona more than we liked the version of Alex that was interested in University of Oregon. When he talked about Oregon, it was like, oh, well, Kevin said we should live in this dorm and I'm going to be roommates with Mateus and, blah, blah, blah. And when he talked about Arizona, it was like, I think I'm going to live in the pre-business academic residential community in the dorm because I think that'll be a good way to network and meet new people. And, there's academic advising there and tutoring and, it was all kind of stuff like that. And, I found out they have a shortage of male RAs. So it costs a little bit more than Oregon would cost, but that's the way I can make up some of the cost. Oh, and by the way, I'm happy to live in a less fancy dorm, and that'll bring my costs down too. And so that was the person we wanted to support too.
I love that independence. I would love to hear that from one of my kids someday, thinking through the financial considerations. And I want to make sure I've gotten a couple of questions in the past week, and you do a great job of detailing kind of the process. I want to start actually where you're about to go to school. So the FAFSA form is currently open. It opened October 1st. That's something that the parents would complete starting senior year, right? If their kid will be going to school the following year.
Right. So everybody who thinks their kid might go to college should complete the FAFSA fall of senior year. Now, you do the FAFSA fall of senior year. Doing the FAFSA is a lot like doing your taxes, where you could certainly wait until April 15th, fill out the form, send it in along with the check for whatever you owe. But if you start thinking about it ways ahead of time, there are some planning opportunities that could bring down your expected family contribution, which is the number that the FAFSA calculates. So taking a step back, the FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. That is how you apply for student loans. That's how you become eligible for a Pell Grant. It's how work study gets allocated. It's also a tool that colleges use to distribute their own need-based financial aid. So I think one of the big mistakes that families make with the FAFSA is assuming, oh, well, my expected family contribution is low, so therefore my college cost will be low. And really what it comes down to is, what does the college do with that information? Do they meet financial need or not? And if they don't meet financial need, then it doesn't matter what your expected family contribution is. You're not going to get scholarships on the basis of need. So planning for the FAFSA is really best done a little ways before. The FAFSA has been simplified and changed and edited, and there's another round of simplification that'll come into play next year that has really reduced the planning opportunities. The really big element in the FAFSA calculation is the parent's income, and there just isn't a whole lot you can do to change your income. There are two big items that get subtracted from your income in calculating how much of it is available to pay for college. One is your family size. So, what is your household size? And you basically subtract the federal poverty level for a household, your size, from your income. And then
so more kids equals you get
more
to
kids
subtract
equals
more.
Larger allowance.
Okay.
Not a reason to go out and have more kids. But on the other hand, if, for example, you have an aging parent who's considering moving in with you, or you might be able to claim them as a dependent on your tax return, that could be, something to think about in time for the FAFSA, because that would increase your household size. The other big element that people can plan for is you also subtract your actual tax liability. So, for families who are potentially eligible for need-based financial aid and want to increase that aid, that aid eligibility, things like, using Roth retirement contributions instead of pre-tax, because those increase your tax liability. And in a sense, you're just prepaying your taxes. You're shifting your tax liability into a year where it's more beneficial than a year when it's, than when it's less beneficial. The other pieces of the FAFSA are the parents' assets, the student's income, and the student's assets. And student income, really not much of a factor because their first $7,000 of income doesn't count at all. Parent assets and student assets are the ones that do. The parent assets are pretty negligibly assessed, like 5.6% of your assets value counts on the FAFSA. So it's not huge, but on the other hand, pay your rent, pay your mortgage. A lot of people go, oh, I need to do the FAFSA right on October 1st. No, you don't. You should pay your big bills, your rent, your mortgage, your credit card, your car payments, all those things to clear out your bank account before you file the FAFSA.
So the cash that you have counts, the investment accounts that you have count, the retirement accounts that you have?
Retirement accounts don't count. So your cash in your checking and savings account counts, your 529 accounts for all your children count. Any taxable investment accounts you have count. If you have I-bonds, those count. So all of those things count. So definitely do what you can to eliminate some of those before you file the FAFSA. It's not the biggest piece of the puzzle though. So, but it is the one that people tend to focus on because that's the only piece of planning left to you.
I know sometimes there are people out that are like, hey, I know a way that you won't have to report as much assets. You buy an annuity from me and then, it's magically disappearing from the form. Can you do some of that kind of magic?
Oh, I hate when people say that.
Yes. Just envision a chalkboard and fingernails. That's how financial planners feel about those types of seminars.
Well, and the other one I hate is, oh, don't save, you'll get more financial aid if you don't save. If you save, you'll have more choices. Your savings don't impact you all that much. What I see people doing a lot when they get the annuity sales pitch is oftentimes they'll even tell a person, cash out your 529 and buy this annuity. So they do. And then by cashing out the 529, they have this big taxable event that adds to their income that will cost them far more in financial aid later in the game than did having that 529 as an asset. So your assets count at 5.6% of their value. So if you've got every $1,000 increases your expected family contribution by $56. So that leaves you $944 to the good for every $1,000 of savings. Now, let's say you took that 529, you cashed it out and bought an annuity. So first and foremost, you're paying income taxes and 10% penalty on the growth in the account. But secondly, let's say it was a $20,000 let's say it was a $20,000 account that was $10,000 of contribution and $10,000 of gain. Well, you've just added $10,000 to your income on the FAFSA, and your income, your incremental dollar of income is assessed at 47 cents. So that cost you $4,700 in financial aid right there.
Not to mention the lockup, and there's a bunch of other details. I would just
Yeah,
say
not to mention that your
a,
annuity probably has a 3+% annual M&E charge on it that's saving you 5% in
yeah,
you know,
M&E
in
for
value on the
expenses.
FAFSA. So no, don't get the annuity.
Talk to a fiduciary financial professional if you're getting that advice. I'd get a second opinion, I'd say. And then, so let's talk about the student assets. And then we have a question about family members, but I want to first get to, okay, so the students, 529s, the parents typically own.
Yeah, 529 is the parent's asset, regardless of whether it's a parent-owned or student-owned.
If the grandparents own it, it's not on
If the grandparents own it, you don't report it at all. So
Right.
grandparents, aunts, uncles, family, friends, anybody like that, you don't have to report it on the FAFSA.
Okay.
There's a second financial aid form called the CSS Profile. Talk about that in a minute.
Perfect.
Got on the agenda right here.
Yeah. We'll put a pin in that one. So then, okay. So,
but student assets.
Yeah. Student assets. You have a wedding fund that you want to be there.
You have
an UTMA.
You have a Robinhood account, or you just have a student who had a job and was making, $17 an hour all summer long.
They're an influencer. They've got a social media empire making. So what happens to that money?
So that money is all assessed at a rate of 20%. So where your parent assets are assessed at 5.6%, the student assets are assessed at 20%. So every $1,000 that your student has adds $200 to their expected family contribution. So something else to think about before you file the FAFSA is look at your student's bank account. If they have something like a UTMA account, that also counts as their asset. That can be converted to a 529, although there are some tax liabilities associated with that because you're going to have to liquidate and
so a UTMA, by the way, is that's the type of account that's like kind of owned for a kid. There's somebody in charge as a guardian. They used to be a lot more common when I started, and probably you in the business in the late 90s and early 2000s. That's how you title an asset where the child really owns it. And there's somebody in charge of it until ages 18 or 21, depending on the state. So those types of accounts, which some consider an alternative to 529s, are going to be reported higher. So you could put the money in a 529.
Yeah, so you can transfer a UTMA to a 529, and then it goes from being the student's asset to being the parent's asset. So that is oftentimes pretty beneficial, but if it's a large account, that's something that you probably want to do either before your first FAFSA income year or gradually over the course of several years so that you don't create income for the student that's reportable on their FAFSA. But if the student just has a bank account with thousands of dollars in it because they worked all summer and were so busy working that they haven't spent their money, and it's money that's for college, they can deposit that into their own 529. And that again turns it from student asset to parent asset. It also makes sure, since that's money that's for college, that it is still available when they go to college instead of being spent on whatever it is that kids spend money on.
It doesn't take much for that money to disappear.
No, it doesn't. And of course, with earned income, they can contribute to a Roth IRA as well. That fully removes it from the equation. But I think, parents really focus on their own assets, which have a really negligible impact, and then leave this, potentially very large bucket right now, just with wages being as high as they are, of assets that haven't, that are going to come back to bite you.
Yeah. And as a financial planner, I'm just thinking like, oh, what if grandma leaves an inheritance or something like that? Maybe that should be in a trust until an age that's older than college or something. I mean, this can get very technical. We don't need to get into those weeds.
It can get super
a lot
technical
to think about.
So I would say, the other thing to think about, because trusts can get really complicated and really messy for students. Inheritances can really screw up all of your college financial planning. But the other thing for families to think about is there's two big types of scholarships that colleges give. Some give scholarships on the basis of need, and some give scholarships on the basis of merit. So if you are not eligible for need-based financial aid and you don't want to pay the full price of college, then you want to look for colleges that offer merit scholarships. Not all
And
colleges
would they consider information on the FAFSA? Like, let's say you're a family that is, and I think I read this in your book, you're a family that like does have a lot of assets. You actually do have the ability to pay. And you're like, I'm going to blow off this FAFSA because what have you done for me lately? I'm not going to get any money. Could that be a signal to the university that, or the college for admission purposes that, hey, you have an ability to pay?
So a lot of families do that. I would caution against not filing a FAFSA and assuming that the college is going to know that you're not doing that because you don't need financial aid, because actually a larger body of families at the low end of the income spectrum don't file the FAFSA.
Just because information isn't as available and it's complicated too. Yeah.
It's confusing, it's convoluted, you got to find your tax, log into the IRS and get your tax return transferred over. And if you're not a tax filer, you got to go through all this other hoopla to file it. So
it's not easy.
So if you are a high income family that would like to, for the purpose of gaining a leg up in the admissions process, would like to demonstrate to the college that you are able to pay full fare, you should absolutely file the FAFSA.
So I have a specific question from one of our attendees. In their family, there's a child going to college, and feel free to clarify, Tina, if this isn't exactly right, but there's a kid going to college. There are other members of the family who are children who have savings accounts in their names, or maybe as a custodian, like a UGMA or UTMA. Would the family have to report the other kids' assets, or is it just in the name of the child going to school?
No, just the assets in the name of the student who's going to college. So if that's your situation, like say you have multiple children who each have a UTMA account, you'll want to keep the younger children's UTMA accounts in UTMA accounts until you actually are filing their FAFSAs. Something that you'll want to do, because you're going to do like a one-time transfer from the UTMA to the 529, is bring up the cost basis in that account over time. So that when you do make that one-time transfer, you're not incurring realizing all of that gain, all of that income.
I just can't tell you how often families are like, look, I don't know if the kid's going to college. So I don't want to put the money in a 529, but I do want it to be in their name, or I think they may get scholarships.
Mm-hmm.
We're actually going to have a webinar just on 529s next month. But sometimes I want the family to demonstrate their personal philosophy with their kids' decisions, and also they need to recognize that it's not always that simple to just be like, put money in their name.
Yeah. Well, so first and foremost, I would say there's been a whole ton of research done on this topic. And one really striking piece is that kids whose families have saved for college in any amount not only enroll in college at higher rates, but graduate at higher rates. And that is even with, $500 of college savings. Now, there's a lot, there are a lot of arguments around cause and effect, of course, in there. If I'm saving for college, I'm probably talking about college with my kids. I'm probably, coaching them along the way to make sure that they do apply and whatnot. But if you are two college educated parents who have a couple of kids, the likelihood that none of them goes to college is very low, especially unless you have some like serious aversion to, to college. Like, I just want a family of tradespeople. No one's going to college on my dime. So with that being said, I think that setting up a 529 and having it available and contributing to it on an ongoing basis is just going to make the process so much less bumpy. More savings gives you more choices. When it came to my family, my daughter had got a full tuition scholarship at the University of Oregon. For a lot of reasons, that college was not a good fit for her. Had we not saved, that would have been that would have been her college choice. And instead, she's at a college that is truly a perfect fit for her. She's had a fabulous experience, COVID notwithstanding. She's had a terrific 4 years. She's done study abroad. She's made a whole new set of friends. She's really, found her people and found a place where she is. Had we not saved, that wouldn't have been one of her choices.
I want to get into that philosophy of spending and saving and the family philosophy in a minute, but I've got a couple more like FAFSA specific questions. One of them is, do you file FAFSA every year or is it just the senior year?
So you file it every year for every student. So each student has their own FAFSA and you file it every year. When you do it the first time, it's a big hoopla. When you do it subsequent times, it's what's called a renewal FAFSA. So your first time, it's, like the full colonoscopy. The second time, it's maybe more like an X-ray where you're just kind of updating the information that you provided previously.
Really good to know. And also you mentioned in the book, like, let's say that something radical changes, you did have assets and then, there's a catastrophe, a family member loses a job, you're setting the tone to then be able to go and say, hey, we've had these changes of circumstances or things like that, correct?
Yeah. And I mean, I absolutely believe every family should file every student, because it's really the student's FAFSA, every student should file the FAFSA every year, regardless of their financial need. If for no other reason than the FAFSA is, the application for federal student loans. And if you ever have, if you have expectations for your child as part of their education or, metrics you need them to hit, whatever that is, I want you to, you're welcome to major in philosophy, but I need you to double major in something that might put you on a career track or, whatever those things are, you don't really want to pull the rug out from under them. You might just say, okay, well, thank you very much here. I need you to fund your college to the tune of a student loan every year.
Yeah.
Rather than you're not going to go at all.
And
So that would be, really the, a primary reason why families would want to do it regardless of financial need. And like you said, your situation could change. We're coming up on a recession. Had you heard that, Melissa?
I have, but when I was getting my hair done this week and nobody was there to answer the phone and everybody was coming in, I was like, I don't see it in the consumers' lives, but yes.
Yeah, right. Weirdest recession.
The Fed is hell bent on a recession.
But let's say we do have a recession and instead of everybody having a job, some people lose their jobs and you're one of those people. Filing the FAFSA said you were kind of serious about paying for college in the first place. And it gives you a benchmark to go back and say, look at what's changed in my situation.
That's a big deal. So I also know, I know some of the people listening and the people who will listen to our replay as well, maybe in families with divorce or single parents or blended families or all three. And so can you describe how the FAFSA works if there's two households?
Yeah. So the FAFSA asks for just the custodial parent to file it. So only the custodial parent reports their income and their assets along with the students. Right now, for this year's FAFSA, the custodial parent is the parent the student spends the most time with. Next year, when the FAFSA simplification goes into effect, it'll be the parent who provides the most financial support to the student. So this is something to consider if you are the custodial parent this year and next year it's going to be your ex or vice versa. Does your financial picture look dramatically different? There's a tool you can use on the Department of Education website called the Student Aid Estimator. And you can punch in both parents' information and see if there's a big difference between the two. And something that you'll want to do when you do that, because it asks really high level questions. If you are paying alimony or child support, you subtract those from your income. If you're receiving alimony or child support, you add those to your income. So oftentimes those will equalize the two parents. And so just make sure that you include both of those in your
Do
calculations.
the calculations.
So, important thing, if that is you and those numbers are really different, that doesn't mean don't apply to colleges because you might lose financial aid. I would say it's still okay to apply to colleges if you are accepted to them with a generous financial aid package. Before you say, hey, we're all in, go back to the college, go back to the financial aid office and say, this is our situation this year. Next year with the change in the FAFSA, this is going to be our situation. Will you continue to offer us the original financial aid package, or will it?
Great advice.
And oftentimes the answer is yes, we'll keep doing it, because the secret sauce in college is most colleges are actually actively trying to attract and enroll students.
And graduate, right? The graduation rates matter.
Graduate them. So the worst thing for a college is that you start there and transfer away. They don't want that to happen. And so if it takes a couple more dollars to keep you on board for a few years, they will in many cases meet that need. So the other question that comes up, what if the parents are divorced and have remarried? So if you have married someone else, that person's income and assets also get reported on your FAFSA. It doesn't matter that your prenup says they weren't going to contribute to your kids' college, because the prenup was not with the Department of Education, it was with you. So that's,
if there are more kids in the household, then would they get added?
Then it can help. So it's not always a negative, but it's just something to know about. And again, if that's you and you're not going to qualify for financial aid because of that, then you need to be looking for colleges that offer merit scholarships that are not dependent on your income. The other thing for families who are divorced is that many private colleges use a supplemental financial aid form called the Css Profile. And
that was going to be my next question, for understanding the CSS and the difference.
The majority of schools that require the Css Profile require both parents to report their income and assets.
So that's a different tool for a couple hundred colleges. Some of the more elite schools, perhaps, that is doing some extra investigation to determine what your ability to pay is.
They would like to get a fuller picture of the student's finances. And there are some things that come up in the profile that can benefit the student, or that can benefit some students. Most families will find that their expected family contribution is higher on the profile than it was on the FAFSA, not just because if you're divorced, both parents are reporting, but because it will capture information about your home equity, that annuity that you bought, so it wouldn't be on the FAFSA, you do report that on the profile. So,
okay, really good to know. And is there a way you can figure out who is this, am I going to have to do 2 or 1 depending on the school? Is that?
So you always do the FAFSA, because the FAFSA is the tool that colleges are required to use to allocate federal dollars. When you do the Common App and you add colleges into your application, you'll see if they require the Css Profile as well. There's a research website I really like called College Data. Okay. And you can look up the colleges that you're interested in, and each college has a series of tabs. One of them is the Financials tab. This is a great source of information, because it'll say, first and foremost, do they use just the FAFSA or the FAFSA and the Css Profile? And then it also tells you, do they meet financial need for students who have it? And if they meet it, do they meet full financial need or just a portion of financial need? And they will also say what % of students who had no financial need got merit scholarships.
Oh, really good to know.
Super helpful information. I would always recommend that people double check the information that they see on College Data with the information on the college's own website, but it's a really helpful initial screening tool.
So it's called collegedata.com.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Good. And then, so let's talk about that discovery of the price of college, because we can all go look at a price tag, which can be shocking, make you want to vomit. Like it's ugly nowadays. And, for many of us who were educated 20 plus years ago, it's way different. But then you indicated, Anne, that your daughter's going to one of the most expensive schools in the world, or the most expensive school in the world, and yet she has a much better package than what the sticker price is. So
Mhm.
tell us about how to get some information on that, very opaque, non-transparent number. How do you
Yeah.
figure out what the real scoop is?
So a couple of things. I mean, first, the first is one of the things that I find most interesting in the whole college process is we always hear that college tuition has gone up, 5, 6, 7, 8% is the tuition inflation rate every year. And that is true. That is the published price of college. The net tuition revenue, which is the tuition dollars that colleges collect, has stayed flat for about the last 10 or 15 years. In fact, the average tuition discount rate last year was about 56%. So
Interesting.
every $1,000 of tuition that's charged, only 440 is actually collected. That does not mean that everyone pays 46% of list price, but it does mean that there are lots and lots of great discounts that are available out there. So colleges give scholarships, some on the basis of need, some on the basis of merit, some do both. But colleges who award scholarships on the basis of need, regardless of how they offer scholarships, the first thing to do when your child is interested in a college is go to that college's website and do their net price calculator. Every college is required to have a net price calculator, and these have some minimum requirements of the data that they collect. So at a minimum, you will punch in your income and asset information, and it will tell you what students like yours paid to attend that college the previous year. Some of them will also collect academic information. Those are colleges that offer merit scholarships to everyone with a GPA above X. And so you can take that number and see, okay, here's probably what it's going to cost me to go to this college. We found when my kids were applying, so my son we didn't do net price calculators for my son because he was applying to public schools, and we knew exactly what it's going to cost him because they were all like, these are the scholarships we offer,
It's a little bit less of a wheel and deal type situation there, right?
Exactly. For my daughter, who applied to a lot of private colleges, every offer she got was within $2,000 of what the net price calculator had said it was going to be. So
Wow.
I was pleasantly surprised by that. If you have highly variable income, that may or may not be your actual experience, but don't apply to a college if you haven't done its net price calculator. And we literally got prices ranging from $11,000 to $81,000 doing
Wow.
net price calculators. The other thing is, don't necessarily rule a college out just based on the net price calculator, because often colleges have additional scholarships that are not included in the net price calculator.
Go ahead, and then I'm going to ask a question.
Oh, so the other thing you can do is colleges will list the scholarships that they have available to incoming students. And so you can look there and see what other scholarships might my student be eligible for, and would those bring the cost of this school to within our range. So like my daughter found one college that she really liked. It was the net price calculator was outside of our range. And then she said, oh, look, I would be eligible for this if I got it, this would work for me. And so she applied and and got a partial scholarship there. So net price calculators I find them to be invaluable in the college, in the college search and selection process.
And will they give you like an asterisk and say, hey, we do merit scholarships or not? That'll be on that page, or where else do you look?
It really depends. It really depends on the college. I mean, each of them does their own thing. The one thing is they cannot show student loans, work study, any of what's called self-help aid, where it's really your money just repackaged to you in a different form. They can only show grants and scholarships.
Okay.
And typically they will only show things that you are really likely to get.
Okay, very
so,
good.
if it's a really competitive scholarship, it's probably not going to show up there. But I know we did have some that said, in addition to this, you might be eligible for X, Y, and Z scholarships. And then you can go look at their website and see what those scholarships look like.
So I want to talk about, there's so much great technical detail in the book. So for all of you who have taken the time to listen, I really want to make sure that you take the opportunity to read because it's so informative, and everybody's circumstances are different, right? But I want to talk about philosophy of paying for college for a minute because um, I think it's really important to start earlier with, hey, here's how we think about it. I hear that philosophy for you and your family, and coming through in this conversation where, there were clear boundaries, there was information, there was in your family sharing of accountability and responsibility in the application processes. And sometimes I find the biggest struggle is for families that haven't had the chance to prepare for college. It may be because, I mean, one of the biggest challenges is there's competing financial interests, right? Like you're trying to get the kids through all the other grades of school, plus you're trying to save for your retirement and not, pay the bills along the way. But one of the challenges is if there aren't those discussions and boundaries, we find people who are preparing for retirement and they're saddled with major parent plus loans, or they said, oh, the kids borrowed for college, but we're going to pay those. And if you didn't have the money
And we as the
when,
planner are like, where's that coming from?
yeah, it's like going to have to come from retirement or something, or you're going to have to work longer. And so how talk to me about best practices for like a family philosophy. And I know everybody wants their kids, the sky's the limit. College is so important. It's an investment in their education. But it can also be one of the biggest threats to the parent stability. And I've always said, it's like you're on the airplane and you need to put the oxygen
You're
on
on the
yourself
yeah.
before you help somebody else. If you're derailing your own financial life, you don't get a chance to take out a loan for retirement, right? In most cases. So tell me about, kind of best practices or, red flags.
Yeah. So I would say, so a couple of things, first and foremost, planning for college is equal parts financial planning and parenting. And you have to be willing to do the parenting pieces of it, talking about money, talking about values, talking about what your goals are for your kids, and doing it in age appropriate ways, right? So, introduce the concept of college to young kids by taking them to a Michigan game if you can get tickets. A lot easier to get tickets at my school. Talk about your friends from college, talk about things you learned in college. When they, at some point, middle school, wherever, they're going to start having friends whose older siblings are applying to college. And that can be a time to start talking about, the difference between public and private schools, or that scholarships are available for college. And that, just introducing the notion that college is expensive and it's an investment, and it's an investment that your family is going to make, but within limits. The sooner you start having those conversations, the more opportunity you have to guide your students' path versus letting their friends drive that path. and so that to me is a really, really important piece of it. And I know in the book, there's a whole bunch of conversation prompts at different ages. I think the important thing is approach these conversations from the perspective of goals, not constraints. So, not you can only go to public school because that's all we have saved, but we've saved enough to get you through a public school, and you might be able to find some other options that are available, and we will totally support you in that process. But our priority is that you graduate from college debt free, or that you graduate from college with just the direct student loan and nothing more than that, whatever that thing is for your family. Another thing I would say is there's been tons and tons of research done on what, does it matter what college that you go to? And one big survey that was done is the Purdue Gallup poll, and they surveyed a group of thousands of adults who considered themselves successful in their careers and in their lives, and they tried to trace that back to college and to identify what about college had made them feel that way, because they were all college grads. And what they found was there were no commonalities between big and small schools. There were no commonalities between public and private, but really it came down to 6 experiences that they had while they were in college. And they were things like having a mentor who could help them figure out how to pursue their goals, feeling like their professors cared about them, having opportunities to apply what they learned in the classroom in a job or an internship, working on a project that lasted more than a semester or longer, being engaged in extracurricular activities. And I feel like I've said 5 and there are 6. I'm not sure what 6 is, but
It's
anyway,
fascinating.
those were the things that really made people feel successful. And good news is all of those are available at a lot of different colleges at a lot of different price points.
And the right college for one kid may not be the right college for another. So I think that
100%.
that is so important that, you don't feel the pressure that you need to go this way or that way. And fair is not always equal.
Yeah.
Your experience may not be the perfect one for your kids.
Yeah. I would say also, I think it's really important for kids to have agency in the college selection process. First and foremost, they're the one who's going to go there. And one of the biggest ways that you waste money on college is by transferring. Because oftentimes when you transfer, you lose credits, you lose access to scholarships, and oftentimes you find yourself on the 5-year plan instead of the 4-year plan. So make sure that your student has agency in the college selection process, and they can have agency within a set of parameters that are, academic, social, financial, geographical, whatever those are. There are loads and loads of colleges out there. So whatever guardrails you put around the college selection process, they will be able to find something.
Well, we just have a few more minutes. I want to make sure if there are any other questions. You guys have had great questions tonight. So feel free to type them in, or you could follow up with Ann or myself. I'm going to give you where to find us in a moment. Hey, Ann, now that you've written the book, was there anything that you learned that you want to do differently, or anything that's kind of changing with your philosophy over time?
So I know people ask that a lot. I would say one of the things that has really, this is not necessarily the book, and I don't think I even included it in the book, but one of the things that has always struck me when I talk with parents who are in the process is we approach this over a long time frame. That's just kind of the person I am. That's the person my daughter is. She was the one who was doing the really elaborate college planning process. But because we did that, and we were able to break it out into a lot of component tasks that we did over a longer period of time. Applying to college can be like a full-time job for your student and for you, between all the essays and the tracking down all the letters of recommendation, applying for scholarships, just filling out the Common App, deciding where they're going to go. The earlier you start on that process, the more of it you get done before senior year, and the more ability you have to be present in your child's final that happens that year. And it's really easy to get caught up in the future and what's ahead, and to forget that, oh my gosh, this is the last choir concert, or this is the last soccer game, or this is the last time I could have all the kids over after prom, or so many of those things. So a little bit of planning goes a long way in letting you be present in your child's life.
That's so helpful. Such a great reminder. And now you're going to have all the lasts of college because you've got seniors now. But let me make sure to share. And this has been fantastic. For everybody that's listening, if you haven't, if you're not familiar with Ann, she also was a guest on one of our most popular podcast episodes, which was recorded a little bit ago. I think it was last year, but it's about the FAFSA. So we'll make sure to include that in our show notes. But you also have a website, howtopayforcollege.com, as well as your Facebook community or page is the College Financial Lady. Anything else you'd add about, and the resource section, if you guys do have the book, is fantastic. So make sure that you check that out and download some of those checklists or values or kind of the worksheets that help you to get to planning before it's an absolute crisis where everything is due, this month.
Yeah, and I'm going to second that. If you have the book, there is a link in the book to download all of the worksheets so that you can actually do all these things. There's, there's a worksheet to keep track of the colleges that you're interested in. There's worksheets to calculate things for the FAFSA.
Yep. So really good. And then these are just some disclosures. I always forget to put them in. So, but if you have follow-up questions for me or anyone here at Pearl Planning, just shoot me an email or give us a call. We would be happy to discuss these topics with you. And the amazing thing about, well, the challenging thing about college planning, it would be great if that's all you had to work on. But instead, you, like I said, you are, perhaps caring for a family member, you are preparing for your own retirement, you are raising kids and, trying to do all of the things that parenting requires, while you're also simultaneously trying to develop this philosophy and make this game plan for something that, is in a future that is coming soon, but there's a lot of stuff along the way. So please do know that we do have resources that can help you. Thank you, Anne. I really appreciate the time. You are my go-to when it comes to college education. So we appreciate you.
Me. It's been fun.
Okay. Thanks everybody for attending. And there will be a recording if you want to check this out or share with your friends.